So we're moving on to consciousness and states of consciousness. So remember, William James wrote a lot about the self, and he was writing about how we are constantly changing in our state of awareness. It flows in and out kind of like a river. You can be paying attention to doing something right now. You're listening, you're taking notes, and then something grabs your attention and pulls you from, like people talking over there, and then my attention gets diverted, and then I got to refocus, and then maybe I realize that I didn't eat lunch before class, so my stomach growls, and my consciousness goes there. And so it's constantly changing and ebbing and flowing. And that's what James wrote about. And it's highly adaptive then. So it's very personal and subjective. We can be selective in our attention, or we can divide our attention. Can you really multitask? Can you really be texting and listening to me at the same time? Probably not. So that means you're dividing your attention, or you're selectively attending to what you find more interesting, which would probably be the reason why you're texting, because that's what you're more interested in. And so some of it then we have to be purposeful in where we're aiming our direction, right? But it is very personal. We're all sitting here in the same setting, in the same classroom together, so you could say we're having the same experience, but you all have unique individual personalities, and you've all other things going on in your mind right now. So even your subjective experience of this time and place is individualized. So it's ever-changing and continuous. Okay, what I want you to do on this next slide here is everybody look up at the screen. I want you to just read the red silently to yourself. Just the red. Okay, go. Okay, now write down all the blue words that you can remember. You saw blue words. It's not that you didn't see them, right? Remember Sperling's test? You saw something blue there. Okay, let's call out some of the blue words. Cow, horse, hat, man, boy, unsure. Did we hear boots? Boots. So you didn't see them, right? Because you saw blue things. And especially after I said, okay, now write down the blue, you're like, oh yeah, there was something blue up there. But what were the directions that I gave you? I told you to read the red. I said, pay attention to the red. So we actually, you didn't have a hard time doing that task, right? You could read the red, skip over the blue, and have some sort of understanding of this long, totally not grammatical sentence, you know, sort of long run-on sentence. But your eyes could track it, and you could just block out the blue. You could selectively attend to what I told you to pay attention to. But so you didn't really process that other stuff, but then maybe on some lower level, you actually did do some processing, because we have some correct answers there. Somebody said man, car, candy, shoe, hat. I heard you guys say that. Horse. What were some of the ones that aren't? You came up with some. Cat, you know, it was cow. So a couple of you, boots. Boots is not up there. So, but did anybody notice that the words repeated? Now you see it, but did you notice it when you saw it before? Or it's kind of on a lower level of processing, because you weren't really paying attention to it, because that was not the instructions that you were given. Sometimes when people, if you learn how to speed read, you may learn how to skip over words like the, and, to, in, because you can really just pay attention to the verbs and the nouns and still get the story and read quicker and kind of block out maybe the unnecessary words. Of course, you don't want to write that way, but that's maybe how you can read quicker. So our brain has this really amazing capacity to selectively attend to what we're most interested in and what we find to be most important. So you can block out all the background stuff or all the background noise. So we call it the cocktail party phenomenon. You're at a party or at a bar or something, and it's a large, crowded room, lots of stuff going on. Maybe there's music playing, there's other people talking, but you can engage in a conversation with one person and totally be going back and forth in that dialogue and block out other things that are happening in the room. If something occurs that pulls your attention away, like the music stops playing or somebody breaks a glass, then your attention is going to select to whatever that other stimulus is. Now, younger children are really not capable of selectively attending to a task when there's lots of competing stuff going on, especially if it's interesting stuff like the television is on. They can't sit at the table and do their homework or do a worksheet with the TV on. It's competing. They can't selectively attend to it. All of us have trouble with that. But as your brain gets more pruning that occurs in the prefrontal cortex and you get automation gets faster and faster as you're getting older, we can actually wear headphones and have your music on and study and read. The question is, are you really listening to the music and reading at the same time, or are you actually just blocking one out? Maybe the headphones are a filter to block out all the noise that's going on. Say you're in the cafeteria. Do you use your headphones as a filter? So you actually are reading, but you're not really listening to the music, or it's kind of it's a lower level processing. The second that you are really, really listening and paying attention to the music, then your high road, your more advanced, that sort of, we have sort of this two-track thinking, then that's going to take precedence. And next thing you know, you've read your textbook page 3 times in a row and not processed any of it because you're really just listening to your music. So, is there really such thing as multitasking? Because either way, you're dividing your attention. We can selectively attend to one thing at a time. So there's really no such thing as multitasking. It's really more about jumping from one task to the next, because you're selectively attending to one thing or another. If you are trying to do 2 things at a time, you're really dividing your attention. That's why the teacher will say, please put your pens down, look up here, give me your undivided attention, because they want you to pay attention fully to what's going on. They have cell phone laws now for while you're driving. You're not allowed to be talking on your cell phone with your hand up to your head. Because there was this, big correlation between people talking on their cell phones and getting into car accidents. So they passed the law, in Washington State, and it's hands-free. So you can have your Bluetooth, and you can have, if you have that kind of technology in your car, you can get it set up, and if somebody calls you, you just push a button, like up near your visor, and then you can just start talking. My car doesn't have that because my cars are too old, but my sister has it, and my mom has it in her car, but now the research is kind of slowly coming out. They're doing studies, and they're finding that people are still getting into car accidents with hands-free talking. Why? It's about attention. It's not about having something in your hand and holding it up to your ear. So it's not about the looking. It's about your mind being somewhere else. So their attention is on that conversation, and sort of your automatic low-level processing of driving takes a back seat. So that's bad, right? Yeah, go ahead.
Actually, when you're 16 or 17 and you just get your intermediate license, you're not even allowed to use hands-free talking.
Oh, okay, yeah. And of course, texting is the worst because that takes your eyes off the road as well as your attention.
Wouldn't you be able to argue that even having somebody in the car with you is distracting?
Yeah.
That's why you're not allowed
Right. So inexperienced younger drivers are not like back in our day. I can. Right, we're in the same cohort, right? When my sister got her license at 16, I was 13. My parents were thrilled because she could then drive me around, take me to swim practice, and
You weren't out after a little.
Right, yeah, and that's against the law now. They can't. A 16 or 17-year-old cannot drive.
You have your siblings, you just can't have your friends.
Oh, okay. Can you cart your sibling around then? Ooh, this is good news because mine are 5 years apart. Camden may have some earning to do to get his driving privileges,
I'm their slave.
and then he has to drive the younger one around. Yeah.
Well, I was in this chapter, and I said something about like somebody else being in the car. Well, in the chapter they were talking about that too. And they're like, well, that's different from being on the phone because somebody can stop the conversation and see what's going on
Right,
in
right.
the car.
Yeah, so it can be distracting, but it does not seem to be as big of a factor as somebody on the phone. Everybody, if somebody's sitting next to you and all of a sudden you see that there's a lot of red lights coming and traffic is slowing down, then everybody, you're sort of a joint attention and hey, slow down. What's going on here? Okay, where do we need to get off at? Right? Yeah, the person you're talking to on the phone doesn't see that, doesn't know that, isn't getting all those other signals. So I'm glad you pointed that out. But it is conceivable that, carrying on a conversation with other people, or if the kids are in the back seat arguing or, poking fingers at each other or, crossing the imaginary line and all that stuff, that you try to keep them so that they stay in their own space. And, you guys need to settle down. I'm trying to drive. I can't be, trying to control what's going on back here when I'm trying to pay attention to what I'm doing, driving.
Why learning to drive is the worst because your parents are nagging and getting mad and scared. They take, I'm just like, Mom, can you stop? You're going to ruin my attention. You're making it worse.
And then you start getting nervous and,
It's just the worst thing ever.
Yeah. And it takes a lot more attentional processes when you are first learning out a skill like driving. After you get better at it, more experience, then we can use sort of lower level processing and do these. That's why we've talked about this before. You'll get from point A to point B and go, wow, I don't remember making all those turns. Was I asleep? No. What state of consciousness was I in? Well, you were awake, but you were in low-level processing because it's so automatic. When you first start learning how to drive, it's not automatic, so you have to use, your higher-level attentional processes. Getting back to divided attention then and multitasking, do we have anybody here who thinks of themselves as being a good cook? Or has been told that, or even a chef even maybe? Okay, you're a good cook. And how do you know you're a good cook? Oh, I'll come to your house. Okay, so you've gotten good feedback then. So you cook things and people like it. So you're getting good feedback. How many things can you have going on the stove and in the kitchen at a time? Okay, so like 3 or 4 pots on the stove, and you got something in the oven, and prepping something on the counter behind you, or? Yep. Okay, so is this multitasking? Is this a lot of practice? Experience? So people who are good at, a novice, an onlooker watching might go, wow, he has eyes in the back of his head. He knows exactly when to take that out of the oven. How does he know? How can he keep track of all these things at the same time? It's through that process of trial and error and that you've learned that you've got to have your food prepped beforehand, chopped up and whatnot, what goes in first, how long that's going to take to cook, when are you checking things, when are you stirring things, when are you not stirring things. All of that just takes experience. And so all it takes is one burned dish or overcooked risotto to realize how to time it better next time. And, no 2 risottos are exactly the same. And so it's really just experience and expertise, not multitasking. So thinking more practically in how we apply these concepts of the two-track processing to studying, and actually, you know, you're reading your textbook, you want to learn the information, use that, get it encoded, you know, use your short-term memory to the long-term memory, and really be processing on a meaningful high level, not this low-level consciousness where you're not really paying attention. Studies, I actually just read a recent study that came out of, I think, the University of Texas last year, where they were comparing students who were using a regular traditional textbook, like paper copy, versus an e-text, reading it on a computer screen. And so the researcher was interested in how quickly they were reading the text, and then how well they were processing the information and then having recall on exams. And they found that the performance on the exams were fairly similar, like it wasn't enough to show a statistical significant difference in their actual performance. But in the learning phase, the online e-text group read way slower and had to reread. People with the paper text, the traditional hard copy, could read faster and didn't have to review and repeat as often. And so when the researchers were observing, they were studying regular college students. When they were observing them as they were reading, they found that the e-text readers were more distracted. They had other windows that were popping up. Your email, they were checking their email. They had a tab for their Facebook. They had the instant messenger pops up right on top of your screen, right over your e-text. Whereas, you know, when you are studying your hard copy book, you can remove all of, you still might have your cell phone sitting on your desk next to you, but you can remove all of that other stuff a lot easier than, I suppose, don't open your Facebook page. Maybe that could eliminate that. But it's so much easier to get distracted. And also, you know, textbooks don't really read like a novel. You don't necessarily read from the beginning to the end, and your consciousness is sort of jumping around to the page. Even on a, you know, regular book, flat page, you're reading the text and through the main paragraph, and then there's a picture that you want to look at. It must be there for a reason, so I look at it. And there's a little description at the bottom. Okay, is there some point to that? Do you guys look at the graphs and charts in the textbook? You know, sometimes those are important things. There's a reason why it's in the book. Okay, so I look at it, I try to interpret it. Now my consciousness has jumped away from what I was just in the middle of reading, and so we don't really read fluidly sometimes in a textbook. It's different than a novel. So our consciousness is kind of jumping around anyway, and then you've got all this outside distracting noise. So no wonder it's hard to study. You know, even with it's something that you're really interested in, it's going to be kind of dry, and you're, you know, maybe more interested in reading about all the funny things that the Seattle Seahawks fans have been doing in the last couple of days. You know, you may read that article from start to finish. Okay, so your assignment, so we're talking about consciousness. Before I get into talking about sleep, the next thing after sleep, and looking a little bit at dreams, we'll get into drugs and alcohol. We won't do any drugs. We'll just talk about drugs. You can take a few drugs before you come to class if you want in the caffeine variety, so that you're awake and alert. But so a consciousness is altered in a number of ways, naturally, but also artificially through substances we take into our body. And so the controversial issue is on alcohol and the drinking age. Right away, you'll see that there are experts on both sides of the fence. So there isn't really a right or wrong way to answer this, but I do want you to use at least two of the written references to support your point. Make sure you're pointing out both sides, acknowledging what the arguments are for both, for either lowering it or keeping it at 21. I've even had students argue, I think we need to raise it to 25. Or they always raise it to whatever age they are, right? This should be 29, right? You know, be concise, succinct, and cite your references. There is a short video segment. It's about 13 minutes long that you should watch. It gives you a lot of those different debates. But then don't just use that as your only reference. You really need to be looking through the other information. Show me that you did the reading, and then cite it. Okay? So that's due before our next class. Okay, let's first see what you know about sleep. Turn on your clickers. Do a little sleep IQ. During sleep, your brain rests. Three, 2, 1. Once upon a time, this is what people thought, that your brain rested while you were asleep. But all it took was, the invention of the electroencephalograph, where we can read your brain waves, what your electrical activity is when you're sleeping, and see there's all sorts of synapses going on. And what's a dream anyway? If your brain is not doing anything, if it's completely offline, then why are you coming up with all sorts of crazy scenarios in your head while you're asleep? Your brain is definitely active while you're asleep. Yes, you're having, your body is resting. What's the purpose of sleep? That's probably the number one question that no one really knows the answer to. All we know is that it's necessary for survival. And so we'll talk a little bit about what the theories are for why we sleep. We just know that when people don't sleep, after a matter of just a few days, they start going into organ failure. So yeah, it's, you need cellular repair to your, any damage that's happened during the day, and you're resting your body, but then that's also translating to your organs. And we know we can't think clearly if you haven't had a good night's sleep. You can learn to function normally with 1 or 2 fewer hours of sleep a night than you need. And I already hear people yawning. We would talk about sleep the rest of the class today, and by the end, you'll all be asleep. Or you don't feel like you want to go to sleep. Just talking about it makes you go, oh. Three, 2, 1. All right. Well, we get into habits. So say your alarm goes off at 6 a.m. every day during the work week, the school week. And then it's Saturday, and you're like, you go to bed Friday night, and you're like, yes, I can sleep in tomorrow. I don't have to be anywhere. You don't set your alarm. Lo and behold, you wake up, you look at your clock, it's 5:59, and you're like, So your body does get tuned into habits, but that doesn't mean that you don't need the sleep. Sleep is a biological need, and it varies from person to person. It's probably largely inherited what your particular biological need is. On average, adults need 8 hours of sleep a night, and preferably uninterrupted. And when we start talking about the sleep cycles, you'll start to understand why it's important that it's uninterrupted, because you're cycling throughout the night. Now, if you go to bed late because you're busy doing homework, or you're working, extra shifts and whatnot, and you have to get up at a certain time, and you're compressing that, and then you get kind of into that habit. If you find yourself exhausted during the day, or I always tell myself, if my first thought in the morning as I'm getting ready for work is, I wonder when's the next time I can lay down, that's a pretty big indicator that I didn't get a good night's sleep and that I need more sleep and I'm not meeting my biological need. Even though my eyes kind of snapped open at 5:59. That's just a habit thing. So, and then if you're, having these big, long sleeps over the weekend, what you're doing is you're playing catch up. You've created a sleep deficit slowly throughout the week. So if you're only getting 5 or 6 hours of sleep per night, by the end of the week, you're short like 10 hours. So then you have a crazy long sleep. You sleep till noon or 1 even. I mean, teenagers are really good at doing that. And part of that's because the brains are developing and you need to sleep. That's an indicator that you have maybe adapted to a habit and your body has kind of gotten used to that, but you're not meeting your biological need. So how do you find out how many hours of sleep your body needs? I would say you should be waking up naturally, not with an alarm, and feeling refreshed and ready to go, and shouldn't feel like you need a nap during the day. Healthy adults should not need a nap during the day. And if you do take a nap, keep it to less than 20 minutes. Because if you do longer than that, it's going to mess up falling asleep that evening, that night. It's going to disrupt your ability to get 8 hours, and you'll just kind of keep feeding the problem. You shouldn't need to nap. You're not a baby anymore or a toddler that does, actually the toddler, the nap helps them sleep at night. Yeah, question?
So I work for Arista, and I work at 4 in the morning Monday through Friday, and I get like maximum 5 hours of sleep a night. On the weekends, I still wake up. Like, I feel like my right to sleep. I don't.
So you consistently get 5 hours of sleep even on your days off. And do you feel refreshed? Do you feel okay? Or do you feel like, is it catching up to you?
Well, right now I'm like 1.
You're feeling, so it's catching up to you. So a lot of night shift workers will do that. They'll get into these habits and these patterns, but you're not really running at 100%. You're kind of constantly, and it might catch up to you. You might catch a cold easier than someone else. You may get headaches, or you might not be as happy. It can affect mood. Sleep is huge for mood. And then also just being able to concentrate. So sitting here for an hour and a half could be mentally taxing, or more taxing than it would be if you had 8 hours of sleep, because you're kind of running on a deficit. So the
Keep my body from losing that flow on the weekends. Because it naturally wakes up after 5 hours of night shift.
Yeah, and you're so young. That happened to my mother-in-law, who was a night nurse for like 30 years, and then after she retired, she continued to have sleep problems, but that was over a very, very long period of time that she'd created a habit. But the problem with a lot of night shift workers is they don't really get the 7 to 9 hours that they need during the day, because that's when life is happening. You got to be at school. That's when you do your grocery shopping. That's when you are seeing friends, because you have to live amongst the you want to be amongst the living, and so their schedule is opposite yours. I suppose my best advice to try to get you more sleep is to slowly back up your bedtime. It's really hard to, and this goes to everyone now. So finding out what your biological formula is. If you are feeling groggy at all during the day, back your bedtime up by just 15 minutes. Because it's too hard to suddenly go to bed a whole hour earlier or 2 hours earlier. Back it up by 15 minutes. Then see how you feel the next day. Then the next day, back it up another 15 minutes if you are still not feeling super great, and refreshed. And then just keep backing it up. And you will figure out what sort of your ideal window is. And I have discovered that mine is closer to 9 hours. 8 hours, I'm okay. Less than 8 hours after about the third night, I'm feeling it. So, you might be a 6-hour person. Does anybody here feel like they biologically are okay with that? There are some people that, and so look at your mom and dad. If your mom and dad were similar, I always wonder if it's maybe like when your mom was pregnant, how she was, if that's, so those wake-up patterns are getting laid down. I don't know. But it does seem to be, pretty individualized. Okay, so let's keep going. Okay, resting in bed with your eyes closed cannot satisfy your body's need for sleep. It is always interesting, though. Students have the most questions probably the day we talk about sleep, which tells me as a teacher that you like sleep and aren't getting enough of it. You crave it. So what's going on there? There's a mismatch between the demands society has on you and what you're getting that your body needs. There's a mismatch. Especially if any of you are still in high school. The schedule is crazy. It does not match your biology. Your brain is developing and not awake at 7 a.m. I would be a witness at the school board to say that. Changes the school time for high school should not start until 9 at the earliest. But then school sports would go late into the evening, and so it's a mismatch. It just doesn't all fit. Okay, yeah, anybody who's laid in bed just resting their eyes and not actually falling asleep knows that it's a miserable feeling, and you don't feel better, you're not refreshed, and it's very frustrating. Okay? So, just resting your feet or your eyes, you have to change your state of consciousness. You have to cycle into non-REM and REM sleep, and we'll talk about that. It's like oxygen, water, food, sleep, in that order. Okay? How many days can you go without it? Well, of course, oxygen's minutes, and then kind of from there, right? Okay, snoring is not harmful as long as it just doesn't disturb others or wake you up. Three, two, one. False. Why could this potentially be harmful? Yes?
If you're snoring or you're not getting as much oxygen through, that something's usually blocking your sinus passages or some such, so I was wondering if that would be affected the amount of rest you got.
Yeah, it could be a sign that you're not getting oxygen. You have something obstructing your airway, and that's why you have that, rattling sound through your nasal passage and back of your throat. And what could that be then an indicator of? Sleep apnea, which can be fatal. You could stop breathing while you're asleep, and then lose consciousness and pass out and die from that. So, and sleep apnea is a common sleep disorder. It's most common in middle-aged, overweight men. Now, there are plenty of people who don't fit that criteria that have sleep apnea. So we also think that it could be genetic. But it really could be an anatomical structure blocking your airway. So a doctor will first see if you have a deviated septum. I've heard of people sometimes getting their adenoids or their tonsils removed to open that airway. Of course, if you do fit the profile, if you're overweight, the doctor is going to say lose weight, right? Try to get this weight off. And then exercise can also help you with sleeping better. So exercise is always prescribed first, usually. Yeah, question?
So my dad actually has sleep apnea as well. He's overweight now, but he used to be a football player and stuff. When he first got diagnosed, he found his depression and all that kind of stuff. It kind of was right around when they were figuring out kind of what it was. And then they finally found out that it's a lot, it's actually quite common in professional football players and college athletes because of how much they work out. That heavy weight and that muscle mass on the chest and the shoulders and stuff actually weighs down.
It's like compressing. So being an athlete, especially a football player or a weightlifter, that could be compressing. And then also often after you've left collegiate athletics, you still eat the way you did when you were an athlete, and so then you gain weight. So it kind of compounds everything. But if you have a family member that is snoring so loud that you can hear it through the walls, down the hall, doors are closed, and you could still hear it, that's a serious, you should encourage that family member to get checked out. Go to the doctor, go to the sleep center. UW has a great sleep center. They can be studied. I had a student a few years ago who didn't fit the typical profile. She was middle-aged. She was in her maybe late 40s, early 50s, but she was female, and she was not overweight. She exercised, did all the stuff that they said that you should do. She went into the UW Sleep Center. They hooked her head up with the EEG, got her pulse rate and monitor everything. She stopped breathing 22 times a minute. So that snoring, that's gasping for air. So every time they stop breathing, so they're actually waking up. But they are not really consciously aware of waking up, and they fall right back to sleep. So it's really interrupted sleep. So a person with sleep apnea, not only could it be dangerous for their health, they actually are not getting good sleep. So then they're going to be tired throughout the day, and it could cause other health problems or emotional problems. If you're not getting good sleep, it could make you depressed, right? But then sleep problems is also a symptom of depression. Sort of chicken and egg, go hand in hand. Okay, the older you get throughout adulthood, the fewer hours of sleep you need. Grandpa that gets up at 4 a.m. Three, two, one. Okay, all right. So, yeah, you guys are right there for the most part. It's not that you need less sleep. You still need, whatever your biological need is, you still need 8 hours on average. The problem is, as you age, cellular repair just slows down in general, right? So we don't recover as quickly. So like if you were to, go on a long hike or something and be using your body at a higher intensity than you normally do. When you're younger, you might have some little aches and pains, and then your cells bounce back and you recover faster. As you age, that gets harder and harder for that cellular repair to take place. We also don't absorb nutrients and minerals quite as well as we age. And things just don't bounce back quite as fast. Just like, like skin, why is the collagen in your skin start to show all those fine lines and wrinkles? It's because it's just not repairing as quickly as it used to. So with sleep, it's not that they don't need it. It's that they are having lots of wake-ups. Maybe they need to go to the bathroom. Maybe they have lots of disrupted sleep. And so eventually they just get up. So they're getting less, of that full cycle of a night of sleep, and then they also might, be falling asleep on the couch in the evening. So you say, Dad, go to bed. Grandma, you're snoring. Go to bed. So she goes to bed at 9 o'clock, and she may have a good sleep from 9 to 11, but then it'll be waking up every 2 hours for whatever disturbance, and eventually just get up. And so it's disjointed, and it's not really what her body needs. So that kind of sucks. Okay, let's ask another one. Sleep disorders are mainly due to worry or psychological problems. Three, two, one. a little bit split. Now, sleep disturbances, difficulty in sleeping, falling asleep, staying asleep, or sleeping too much is a symptom for a lot of psych disorders, especially the mood disorders. Anxiety can also, it can be a symptom. However, we have sleep apnea, which is really a medical condition. And then narcolepsy is another sleep disorder that's fairly common, and it's genetic. Now, you could have one of these disorders, like sleep apnea or narcolepsy, and because of it causing these disturbances in sleep, or sleeping unexpectedly when you don't want to, like in the middle of the day, that's kind of what narcolepsy is, have a sleep spasm, fall asleep, and then, that can be really disruptive. It could cause a mood disturbance because now you're not getting the sleep you need. But, some people will have temporary bouts of insomnia. Insomnia is the most common sleep disorder. You could have a temporary issue, but we can often attach it to something that's going on, right? Okay, so first of all, are you sick? Do you have a cold? All right, if you have a cold, if you can't breathe, you may have a couple of sleepless nights, really hard time sleeping, and then lots of fatigue related to your being sick as well as not sleeping. Okay, so then that's very easy to identify that you don't have insomnia, you're sick. Well, what if you're stressed out? You've got, tests coming up, maybe it's finals week, you could have some sleepless nights. Or maybe, there's just something going on right now in your life. But as soon as the finals week is over, then you get a good long sleep, go back to normal, no more insomnia. So that's, not really then a cause from a psychological problem. It's a real life thing that's happening to you that you're just dealing with. I had some sleep insomnia when I was pregnant. I was uncomfortable. I was, backache, whatever, needed to go to the bathroom, maybe a little anxiety about, not knowing what to expect when the baby arrives. And it probably didn't help that the obstetrician would say to me, you better get sleep because you're going to need your energy when he's here. So that probably didn't help. Because then you look at your clock. Every time you wake up, you look at your clock. I recommend not keeping a clock that's lit next to your bed for a couple of reasons. One, it'll fixate on your thought process and not allow you to relax. And then you go, oh my God, now I only have 4 more hours. And then you're looking, oh, now I only have 3 more hours. That can exasperate it. But also, if it's glowing, the light can affect your hormones in your brain and wake you up, right? And so we'll talk about that when we get to the actual sleep cycles. Okay, last question. The human body can gradually adjust to night shift work. Three, 2, 1. Other people work at night. How many people here work at night? 1, 2. Well, you work very early in the morning. Anybody has in the past done night shifts? Okay. The thing is, we can try to trick our bodies and use artificial lights, turn on the lights, get you're firing up your coffee stand or whatever it is that's forcing you to be there at 3 in the morning. And we can try to simulate day and then try to sleep during the day when everybody else is out and about to get your sleep in. But the simple fact is that our body wants to revolve around sunlight. And so you can trick it so far, but it's just really not as good. It's just people make more mistakes on night shifts. When they look statistically at like truck drivers get in more accidents at night, even though they're sleeping during the day. Thing is, are they really getting 8 hours during the day, or is it disrupted because they're doing all sorts of other things. Or like my mother-in-law, who was the night nurse, when she was raising the 3 kids, I think she worked that 7, I think she went to work at 11 p.m. and until 7 in the morning. That was sort of her shift. So she would, and I think she didn't take that shift until the oldest one was old enough to, they were home alone, like the 3 kids home alone. But she would be then home when they would get up in the morning, and she'd get them breakfast and get them off to school, and then she'd go to bed. But then I would imagine that's also when she would go grocery shopping or do laundry or do whatever things she needed to get done for the house. And then the kids would come home from school, and she would maybe still be sleeping, or she would get up and then she'd get them dinner and get them settled to bed and then go to work. So ultimately, I think she probably would get maybe like a 4-hour. Because, the kids are only gone at school for about 6.5 hours. So, but then that was also her chance to go shopping and do stuff. So I would imagine that she was probably not getting 8 hours of sleep. And then sometimes she would go in probably even earlier, before 11, to make extra money to work a double shift. And now she's 72 years old and she has chronic insomnia and she can't sleep during the day. She can't sleep. It's just really, her brain is really confused. It's pretty messed up. People that live in parts of the world where you don't have the signal of the sun, so like certain times of the year in Alaska, like in the winter it's dark all day, or they have like an hour of sunlight a day, and then in the summer it's the opposite. So does that affect their sleep? Yes, it does. I looked at, patterns of people, reporting sleep disturbances, and it is higher in those climates. They do an okay job of simulating day and night. You can turn on fluorescent lights. You can get the blackout curtains in your bedroom or put tin foil on your windows and try to simulate night during the day when the sun is shining. But also it can kind of, because that's such a key indicator for us, you could be, out with your friends, maybe you're at a party or something, and if you're in Alaska and it's July and the sun is still up, all of a sudden you go, oh my God, it's 2 in the morning. And you didn't even realize that you're having a good time. Like normally, you would have been tired a couple hours ago because you're not getting a very key hormone, isn't being suppressed, or isn't being released because of the sunlight. And what's that hormone? Melatonin, right? So, our body runs on biological rhythms, not just for sleep-wake. Okay? Melatonin is key for sleep and wake, but we also run on biological rhythms and different cycles. Okay, so not just a daily cycle, but different time periods. So we even have yearly cycles, and it really correlates with the position of the Earth from the sun. So, during summer quarter, I often teach an evening class that goes until like 9 p.m. And the class is usually pretty engaging. I usually get a lot of working adults because it's a good time to take a class because they're working all day and then they come to their class. And everybody's really awake and alert. We kind of barely start seeing the sun go down, and we leave the class at 9 p.m., especially at the beginning of the quarter when it's like the end of June, and walk out to our cars, and it's like dusk at 9 p.m. in Seattle, right? And everybody's in a pretty good mood, and some people probably go out and see their friends and do whatever, right? But I've also taught an evening class during winter quarter, and didn't even go till 9. It ended at like 7:40, and the entire and as the kind of winter went on and it got darker and darker, the mood of the class was different. We had less energy. Some people are really affected if you are prone to that, with the lightness affecting your mood. seasonal affective disorder could be an issue for you. But like the whole energy level goes down. It was really hard. We would like drag ourselves out. You know, feel kind of like I wanted like jab stuff in my eyes by the time we were done. It's just really hard, right? And so your body wants to kind of tend to that sunlight. So it happens on a yearly cycle. We also have fluctuations on a 28-day cycle. Females in particular have hormone fluctuations that are really marked in our 28-day cycle. But guys, you cycle slightly in your hormones on a 28-day cycle. You tend to pair up with whatever females live with you. If you have sisters, or or if you're living with another woman, you can start cycling ever so slightly, So then you're feeling frisky at the same time. That was bad if it's your sister, but anyway. Never mind, I didn't say that. Okay. That's weird. Okay. But you know that if a bunch of girls live together, you start cycling together, like really cycling your menstrual cycle. So all the sisters will cycle together, or if you have girl roommates and everybody starts cycling together. But then the one that's most important for what we're talking about is the circadian rhythm, which is a 24-hour cycle. And our cue there is the sun. And then we have a 90-minute cycle that happens while we're sleeping. Okay, so the circadian rhythm, which circadian is Latin for about the day. So about the day, and it has to do with sleep and wake, but also blood pressure. So your blood pressure is lowest in the morning when you first wake up. So if you go to the doctor and your appointment is later in the day, later in the afternoon, and your blood pressure is elevated, and that seems unusual for you, they might say, let's have you come in a couple of weeks, and we'll have you come in earlier in the day to try to get your low blood pressure to see if there's a difference there. Don't work out right before you go to the doctor because your blood pressure might be elevated right after exercising. So we have peaks and valleys in blood pressure, in hormones. And your hormones fluctuating change your body temperature. So, we tend to be, your body's temperature dips down at night, and then it starts to, you start to rise in your body temperature in the morning. So that's why when your heat turns on, you might all of a sudden get too hot, right? Then you got to stick your foot out that's the regulator. That's the temperature regulator, stick your foot out. Can't sleep with socks on either, right? It's just impossible. It always sounds like a good idea, but it never is. Okay, but then sleep-wake is really regulated from the sunlight, and the timing device controlling this is called the suprachiasmatic nucleus, or nuclei, SCN. Okay? The SCN, and it's this little cluster of neurons by your hypothalamus. And remember, your hypothalamus has to do with regulating a lot of hormones in your system, in your whole body. Temperature, eating behavior, sexual behavior, reproductive behavior. And so this little cluster of neurons is the controlling device. And what signals that then is a light that comes into your eye, enters your pupil, hits the back of your retina where you have all those little specialized receptor cells, the cones and the rods. Right? And so your rods are detecting light and dark. So then that is transmitting a signal to the auditory nerve. Transduction takes place. And I know we skipped our modules on sense and perception, but that's called transduction. So then your brain interprets it, and of course normally then it goes to your thalamus and then out to your areas. Well, it also goes to your optic nerve. The SCN sends a neural impulse to your pineal gland. And your pineal gland is a part of your endocrine system. Remember, a very small structure in your brain. And it produces melatonin. So seeing the sunlight and going through this pathway, does it make the melatonin release in your bloodstream, or does it suppress it? What do you think?
Sunlight?
The sunlight
Suppresses
suppresses it. Melatonin makes you sleepy, so it's the sunlight hitting your optic, transduction through your optic nerve. SCN sends a signal to your pineal gland, suppresses melatonin. It's easier to get up in the morning in the summer, right? It's really hard, boy, when when they have that time change. It helps a little bit, but it's a lot harder to get up in the morning. Yeah. In the evening, great question. So in the evening, your pineal gland will naturally start kicking out melatonin. And we have another neurotransmitter that's at work here called adenosine. I'll spell that out. So when you wake up in the morning, we have very little adenosine in our brain. Then as you're awake and going through the day, you slowly start having adenosine buildup. It starts being released. It's a neurotransmitter. And it actually makes you sleepy. So then the adenosine, in conjunction with the release of melatonin in the evening, then you get sleepier and sleepier, and then you're able to fall asleep. So the reason why you can sometimes fall asleep in the middle of the day, even with bright lights or on the beach in the sun, and you can fall asleep, is because you've probably been awake for so long that you have a lot of adenosine buildup in your brain. So it's that groggy feeling, that you just can't keep your eyelids open. The only way to block adenosine is to drink caffeine. Caffeine, that's what it does. It stimulates your brain and it blocks adenosine. So then you kind of wake up, but it's temporary, right? If you take melatonin supplements, it might aid a little bit. I mean, I don't think it's a huge, significant difference in aiding you in falling asleep. But if you take melatonin supplements in the middle of the day when it's bright and sunny out, it's just going to keep getting, suppressed by the sunlight. So I don't really think that is going to work, or it's going to be very short-lived. Some people swear by melatonin. I don't know. I don't know how much science is backing it. I think it's minimal. I mean, it might not be bad for you. It's not very expensive supplement to buy. Yeah, I mean, I think it depends on the person, and especially if you're taking it at night. Yeah.
like half an hour before you go to bed.
Yeah.
It definitely increases.
Yeah, and I mean, I think they've done double-blind studies that show that it is slightly more effective than a placebo.
Yeah.
You could take a placebo, and it might also make you
It might
sleepy.
be psychological, yeah.
Right, yeah. Okay, so the light enters your eye, hits that little SCN, sends a neural impulse to your pineal gland, and that would suppress the production of melatonin. So really, at about 6 o'clock in the morning, you're naturally going to stop producing melatonin, and it'll slowly, gradually, be out of your bloodstream, and then you can wake up. All right, let's see. How many hours of sleep did you get last night? We'll take a poll. Last night was Monday night. Hopefully it was a typical night. 3, 2, 1. Okay. We've got several people that didn't get a lot of sleep last night, and a handful that were in our norm here, and 3 people a little bit above the norm. Okay, let's find out if this was a normal night. And think, like school night, weeknight as a normal night. 3, 2, 1. Okay, so maybe not quite a typical night for some of you. Some of you are still falling into that 5 or 6 hours. Only one person regularly gets less than 5 hours. So on average, adults need 8 hours. But a lot of you guys look like you might still be teenagers. So you actually need more. You actually need more like 9, 9.5. And it's not because your body is still growing. Some of you guys might still be growing. Your body might still be growing. The girl's probably less likely. You're probably full grown. She's like, oh. she's going to be 5 feet forever. Did you say 5 feet?
I'm 5 foot.
Yeah, so you're probably done growing. Yeah, I think I was this height in 7th grade, so I was definitely one of the tallest girls. But so some of you guys might still be growing, and certainly like your, it's interesting. What grows last is your back and your chest. So you have really long arms and legs, and then you pop out in your chest when you're about 21. You're like, yes, I can't wait. But your brain is still developing. So all of you guys, I keep looking at that. I don't know. You all look so young to me. Your brain is still developing. So it's not really about your body. It's about your brain. And you need the sleep to allow all of that dendrite growth and then the pruning to take place. We have a 5-fold increase in dendrites during adolescence. And the pruning is the organization so that you have synapses that are working efficiently for you. And so a lot of sleep researchers think that teens really need 9 to 9.5 hours of sleep. But the reality is that life doesn't really allow that to happen, unfortunately. Okay, how long did it take you to fall asleep last night? Okay, I think that's everyone. This is also an indicator of age. We'll see how long. We won't do a breakdown of age. But if you are a healthy sleeper, you should be falling asleep within 10 minutes. Okay? Within 10 minutes. Within 30 minutes wouldn't be abnormal. But, and if you're unsure, does that mean that you're unsure because you keep waking up, or maybe you fell asleep so fast that you have no idea? But think of like a baby, okay? A baby falls asleep, instantly, and they can sleep anytime, anywhere. Little kids as well. But, a 10-year-old is probably about the ideal sleeper. Let's, not looking at any kind of illness that they might have, or, but, say a healthy child. They go to bed. They fall asleep very quickly. They don't do this thing that we do where you start to ruminate, or you get stuck on you're thinking, and then you actually, so you're tired, but then your mind is racing. And that actually can just make it worse, because then like that whole, oh my gosh, I now only have 7 hours, now I only have 6 hours. Little kids don't do that, right? They don't even have clocks next to their bed. They shouldn't have a clock next to their bed. But they fall asleep very quickly, within 10 minutes. But teenagers tend to be pretty good. If you're able to get rid of, that sleep thinking, that's kind of what that is. You're drowsy, but you're still really awake. Sleep thinking. If you're able to get rid of that, teenagers usually can fall asleep pretty quickly, and then they sleep solidly throughout the night. As we get older, that becomes less efficient. So let's see. How many times did you wake up last night? Okay, I think that's everyone. Are any of you the type of sleepers where you like close your eyes and you open your eyes and it's like 8 hours later? And all of you are under 20, right? Yeah, okay. Yeah, because your brain, it's like really your biological need. Not only is your brain developing during that time, you're also releasing hormones during sleep that are crucial for growth and development if your body is still growing. And you kind of sleep like death, right? But you should, if you are getting the 8 hours, you should wake up and feel pretty good. The problem is if you were woken up by a blaring alarm and it's only been 5 or 6 hours, then you're going to have a deficit. Okay, so 1 to 2 times, 3 or more times, not sure. If you are waking up repeatedly and this becomes a continued problem, maybe find out what's going on. Because this was happening to me a couple years ago. And at first I thought it was just because the children used to wake up at night and I'd have to wake up and feed them. But then I'd have these hallucinations that I was hearing, Mommy, no one's crying for me. It was like I was having an auditory hallucination, which happens when people are falling asleep. You have these auditory and sensation hallucinations. You feel like you're falling or floating or something. And so I was having lots of wake-ups, and I'm like, I'm going to the bathroom, and I'm like, wait a second, I'm not that old. I shouldn't have to go to the bathroom in the middle of the night. That's like for 70-year-olds. And so I was at the doctor, and I just happened to mention it. He said, how's your sleep? And I go, well, I don't know, same as it always has been. And he goes, oh, and how's that? And I said, well, I wake up a couple times. I might have to get up to go to the bathroom once, maybe twice. I don't know, maybe I shouldn't drink water in the evening. And he goes, what's your medication that you're taking? Turned out it was my medication was causing insomnia. So they put me on a different medication. Bingo, I sleep through the night, just like a baby, right? Okay, so sometimes you can figure these things out, without having to suffer, right? Okay, so we know quite a bit. There's a lot we don't know about sleep. We still don't really know why we do it or why we need it. But we know more about what's happening in our brain activity thanks to these sleep researchers. So Hans Berger invented the electroencephalograph, the EEG, in the 1920s. That's where it's totally non-invasive. They put the little electrode wires all over your scalp with glue. They'll stick it at. It takes longer than anything to just stick them all in there. And then you fall asleep. And they're able to record the electrical activity, the patterns of those synapses that are taking place. And so those are the rhythmical brain waves. And he gave them names using the Greek alphabet. Now, he gave the names in the order that he discovered them. So alpha is the first letter of the Greek alphabet. So that was the first brain wave that he discovered. So he says, oh, I see this on the printout. It's coming off the big piece of paper with the little lines that are the electrical impulses are picking up that frequency. And he named it alpha, but turns out you're actually asleep. That's the falling asleep stage. So the awake and alert stage is beta. So right now, are you guys all in beta? You're all awake and alert? Everybody looks pretty alert. I don't see anybody with their head down on the desk, right? Okay. We'll go over the other brain waves as we get through the sleep stages. So it turns out he discovered all of these patterns, and he found that, subject to subject in his sleep lab were not only having these same little brainwave patterns, they were in the same predictable order. It was a stage. Then we have S. Zarinsky in the 50s doing some sleep research, and he's got his 7-year-old son hooked up to the EEG, and he's just sleeping in the lab, and he's looking at the paper printout and monitoring him. And he notices a subtle change in one of the brain waves. And at the same time, he notices that his son's eyelids were flitting back and forth. And he stopped moving. You know how normally you will you'll rotate around in your bed, and you might go from your back to your side, or your knee goes up, your arm goes up. And you notice that his son was completely still, but the eyes were moving back and forth really rapidly underneath his eyelids, and it matched this little brainwave pattern on the paper printout. So he named it rapid eye movement sleep. Then they look at the big picture, and they look from person to person and found everybody did this. And it was in a very set, predictable pattern. So that's where we come up with our sleep stages. There's non-REM sleep, and then there's the REM cycle. So your first 4 stages are non-REM, and that's what Berger discovered in his early research. And then the 5th and final stage is REM. The thing is, we don't go stage 1, 2, 3, 4 REM. We actually we cycle up to stage 4 and then back down before you hit REM. So you go 1, 2, 3, 4, 3, 2, REM. 2, 3, 4, 3, 2, REM. Until you come all the way up to, 4, 3, 2, awake. And the amount of time you spend in each stage changes throughout the night. But this whole process of 1, 2, 3, 4, 3, 2 REM takes about 90 minutes. All right? Here you go. Activate your mirror neurons. Take your yawn. Little sweet baby is falling asleep. Right? So you're in a relaxed state. You've had a lot of adenosine buildup because you've been awake for a long time. You also have melatonin that's been released throughout your bloodstream. And you go from beta brain waves. We'll switch the picture there so that you stop yawning. You go from beta to alpha. Remember I said alpha was what he first discovered, to theta. All in that first stage. Okay? This is how you can remember it. It spells the word BAT. B-A-T, beta, alpha, theta. So you're all in beta right now. If you started to get heavy eyelids, and feel like a brain fog, you know what I'm talking about. And your head even nods, that means you're slipping into alpha. And then if you do a real head bob, because you're sitting up, right? And then you feel your mouth, you get that feeling in your, you know what I'm talking about. Then you really fell asleep. You slipped into theta just ever so quickly, and then snapped awake because the gravity of your head, bobbed, and then you woke up. So it's pretty easy to wake back up in stage 1 as this transition. It's a transition stage from relaxed wakefulness to sleep. This is where you experience the hypnagogic hallucinations. So often it's a sensation of falling or floating. Or if you spent the day on a boat, you'll feel like you're still on the boat. You're rocking. You're in the boat. You're in your bed, and you feel like you're rocking. Or you went to the water park, and you were in the wave pool, and you feel like that is, while you're laying there and you're drowsy and falling asleep. Or you can have the hypnagogic hallucinations of auditory sensations. So you think you hear somebody calling out your name or something, or like me, somebody's calling. Somebody always wants me, And then we have these weird things called myoclonic jerks. So it can be kind of a combination of the hallucination. So you have the sensation of falling, and then your whole body kind of jerks. You have this myoclonic jerk, and then you wake up, and this might happen a couple of times. You might not have a real consciousness of it happening at all, and just really fall asleep quite quickly. Once you're completely transitioned into theta, your breathing becomes even and rhythmical and deeper, slower. So like your bed partner, like if you sleep with someone, or if you're in the same room with someone that falls asleep, you can tell when they're really asleep because of the change in their breathing pattern. So the fake sleepers. When the kids are fake sleeping, you go, you're not really asleep, I know you're not, and especially when they start smiling a little bit, then you know that they're fake sleeping. But if you're in an uncomfortable position, if you're not laying down, you're sitting up in class, or you're on an airplane, Have you ever had a myoclonic jerk sitting up?
But on the rest in front of me.
Does anybody ever do that? And then you go, did I just do that? The person next to you is like, uh-huh. So I hope you didn't spill your drink, right? I mean, I think it only happened once in class, and it wasn't at this college, just someone went, huh, like that, and their head popped up, and their whole chest sort of torqued, and I didn't feel bad at all that they fell asleep in my class because they were so embarrassed that it was fun. Oh, no. Okay, so this girl is really asleep now. Okay, she's drooling. If she were to wake up now, she could feel it in her head. She would know that she had actually fallen asleep. So if you're in a place that you're not normally, supposed to be sleeping, like class, you may not know how long you've been out. Chances are you probably haven't been out very long. But this person is really now asleep, and they're in theta brainwaves and transitioning into stage 2. So stage 2 is sort of a consolidation stage where, okay, you're asleep, but your brain is still sort of active, and it's still getting settled down. So we see some brain activity. So your theta brainwaves are, they're slowing down, but then we see this sort of burst of electrical activity. And, they're not really sure why that's happening. Why are you having all these electrical impulses when you're trying to fall asleep? Well, maybe your brain is sort of sorting and trying to settle certain areas down so that you can go into a deeper sleep. And then it's slowing down, and then we'll see a high voltage come up like that, and that's called a K-complex. By the end of about 20 minutes, then the brain waves have really slowed down, gotten deeper into theta. Okay, so stage 3 and 4, we're still in non-REM, is now deep sleep. The difference between stage 3-4 is pretty indiscriminatory. I think really stage 3, you're kind of going from theta to delta, and then stage 4 is really solidly delta. I think for an untrained sleep researcher, it'd be hard to tell exactly when that moment happens, when you're looking at the paper. But think delta sleep as being deep, so you've got, that should be easy to remember, D, right? Delta deep. Much harder to wake up. Okay? So this is where the child is falling asleep and you can carry them around. They don't wake up. But oddly enough, this is also when people sleep talk and sleepwalk. But they are really asleep. Their eyes could even be open, but you can tell that they're asleep because they might sort of interact with you, but it's kind of bizarre and disjointed. And they're sort of robotic. And it's actually pretty common in children. Most people grow out of it. You just want them to be safe. I've heard of parents having to put bolts on their doors way up high so that the child doesn't leave the house. But some people will, go through phases of it. They may sit up in bed and talk and then go right back to sleep. It's probably best to just help them get back to bed and not wake them up, because if you wake them up, they'll get upset. Yeah, Kristen?
So I know that I've talked in my sleep, but if talking in your sleep is when if it's in delta, then, but I've known that I'm talking in my sleep. So not all the time, but some of the times that I've talked in my sleep, I know that I can hear myself.
So you have kind of lucid dreaming? Lucid dreaming is where you have some element of control in your dream. Do you have that at all? Maybe. So, I mean, it is an interesting phenomenon that you're in deep sleep, yet so this is, your brain is clearly making synapses, things are happening, you're acting out your dream. Your brain, you have no visual input, but that area of your cortex is firing, and, your emotional centers are firing. Yeah, question?
So then, what engages and what starts sleepwalking? Why is that?
Good question. Well, sleepwalking could be inherited. Stress might bring it on. Sometimes people will find that their little bouts of sleepwalking or sleep talking can be brought on by stress. The night terrors are also happening during stage 3 and 4, where the person is screaming and crying, but they're asleep. So, you know, it could be a phase, and they could grow out of it, and most people do. Is it stress that brings it on? I mean, I think as like the other members of the family that can try to observe when they see it happening, what might be bringing it on. This is also why what you see and do right before bed is like a tape recorder. Our dreams tend to be pretty boring, run-of-the-mill, like you're walking to class, you can't find your class, you're frustrated, you can't get, you know, you can't figure out where you're supposed to be, you know, and you kind of play out your day, and the sort of, most dreams are pretty mundane and boring in that way. You replay out what happened. What if you are 5 years old and you just watched Spider-Man 3 right before going to bed? And now you have a dream that the Sandman is going to pound you in the head, you know, and so it's like a little tape recorder. So they have those visual areas that they've just received input, not only the visual stimuli, but also the emotional, the amygdala, had just got activated. So then they go to bed, they replay that. If it gets incorporated in other real things in their life, like now Sandman's at their school, you know, and they wake up crying, and it's a nightmare. And their brains are immature, they're not developed, they're more affected by that kind of stuff. Although I've had nightmares, even as an adult, you know, occasionally you have, and you're like, wow, that was, you know, and you wake up, your heart's racing, and you're like, okay, so what triggered it? Something probably from your environment has triggered it, whether it be stress or just some kind of stimulus that you were exposed to that day. Other times it might be harder to pinpoint. Hopefully you grow out of it, right? If it's disturbing. Yeah, another question? So you're probably somewhere between the alpha and theta. You could be, you know, if you're semi-conscious in interacting and then being able to remember it later. Yeah, if other people around you think that you're interacting with them, but then when you wake up, you have no recollection of it, then you really were asleep. But if you're having a recollection of it, then you're probably floating back up into alpha brainwaves. I mean, a lot of these questions, the only way to really know is to go in to be studied, to have an EEG stuck on your scalp, and to have an expert observe you.
It's weird because I'm a soccer referee, I'll have these like weekend long, 40-long tournaments, and I'll go do like 5-6 games a day, you know, hot sun, I'm exhausted, I come home, I go to bed, and completely random, I wake up and I still feel like I'm asleep. I have no control of my body, and I can see my room, everything's like coming through, I can touch it, but at the same time, I look out my floor and I'll see the soccer games just play out before my very eyes, and I'll start feeling signals and calls right every day. I'm like, what kind of on? I know I'm doing this, but I don't control it.
You know, you could be, it could be a little bit of lucid dreaming. You're asleep, but so lucid dreaming is being aware that you're dreaming. So normally people will actually still be laying down in bed, and you're having a dream, and you realize in your dream, I'm dreaming. And then you can actually, if you can have control over your dreams, and some people say that you can learn how to do that, how to have lucid dreams. Other people will never do it, you know, and what happens to me is the second I realize I'm dreaming, and especially if it's a good dream, I'll be like, yeah, let's go do that again, and then I wake up. You know, and of course, if it's a scary dream, I tend to wake up. So maybe you're lucid dreaming. Let's hope you don't have a sleep disorder, like REM sleep disorder, which we'll talk about next. We have just a couple minutes. So 20 to 40 minutes the first time around. Here's what the different brain waves. You guys are doing an activity this week. You can take a look at that. I'll never ask you a test question saying, hey, what stage is this? You know, I'm not going to do that, but the activity is very helpful in showing you how the patterns work. But then our last stage is REM sleep. So REM sleep, there's a a couple key things that happen. Your brain waves become really fast but regular. So on that last slide, I didn't show it very long, but your beta brain waves are fast but irregular because we're conscious and we're getting lots of input, stuff is happening all the time. So it's sort of irregular, fast activity. When it's REM, it's fast and very even. And this is when we have the really bizarre dreams, but they often tend to be in like full senses. Color, surround sound, you can taste things, sometimes smell even. This is when you have your sex dreams, and you actually do have physiological arousal during REM sex dreams. You can have orgasms, spontaneous orgasm during REM cycles. They study this in sex research. Of course, you know what a nocturnal emission is a wet dream, right? But women can also have nighttime orgasms, and they will put, how'd you like to be in that study? They put the instruments in your body, females, yeah, or the little gauge around your penis to see how much blood engorgement is happening, going on there while you sleep. And yeah, guys get erections every night. So you're sleeping, happy, really happy, so it's really a physiological thing that's happening. But you're like, dude, there's no stimulus coming in. It's absolutely just being created in your mind, which makes you think, hey, you could have a spontaneous orgasm when you're awake, maybe. They have clinics for that. But you can taste things. But at the same time, your motor cortex is not activated. So when they had the people in the sleep study during this REM cycle, there's no activity in the motor cortex. The person is paralyzed. They don't move around in their bed. They are just totally immobilized, and so appear to be sleeping really hard, but they're in this different stage. Okay? So rapid eye movement in the first cycle of the night is only about 10 minutes long, but gradually, as you go through the night, your REM cycle gets up to about 60 minutes. So this is why sleeping through the night in a long spell is really important, because we need REM sleep. The sleep researchers have found that when we disrupt people's REM sleep, so they'll intentionally wake the subject up every time they go into REM sleep. They wake them up. Wouldn't that be like annoying? You're in the sleep study and they keep waking. A buzzer goes off in your little lab bedroom, right? And they keep waking you up. They find that REM sleep is really important for memory consolidation. So like the people that had the disturbed REM cycles are really bad at doing the puzzles the next day. Non-REM sleep is, correlated more with how long you've been awake. So if you worked a double shift and haven't been to bed for 30 hours, and you went into the sleep lab, you'd probably have lots of non-REM sleep and not get that REM sleep, those cycles. So throughout the night, this is kind of what it looks like. So every cycle is 90 minutes. The first part of the night, it's mostly non-REM with just 10 minutes of REM, and then that gradually shifts until you wake up in the morning. So what happens if you go to bed, say you go to bed at 2 a.m., and you have to get up at 6, so then that's only 4 hours of sleep. What did you deprive yourself of? REM. And you wonder why you can't remember your psychology terms. It's because that's memory consolidation. So I'm sorry for keeping you late. Make sure you do your assignment, and we'll finish up talking about dreams and sleep disorders